Hi, I'm John Seacott, executive editor of the Brewer Magazine. Welcome to another edition of the Brewer Magazine podcast. We are sponsored by Keg Logistics, and you can check all that out at keglogistics.com/brewermag. Well, about once a month, we're going to be turning our focus to the cider business world. Of course, you can check out our business resource publication, ciderbusiness.com, as we are looking to continue to build great connections with both the cider and beer industries. So we'd love to be able to share your insights. And we started this last month, talked to Amanda Oborn of Finn River about small canning strategies. And this month, talking to one of the largest craft cidery businesses in the country, as I had a chance to talk with Andrew Blake, the CEO of Blake's Beverage Company, which started as Blake's Hard Cider and has added on AVID and Austin Eastciders. We talked a lot about flavor and what is cider in the entire industry of beverages, kind of becoming that fourth category. You've always heard of beer, wine, and liquor, but why does cider get not get involved in that conversation, or where does it fit in a drinker's mind? We talk about that. We talk about flavors. We talk about being able to go into other different categories, RTDs and seltzers. Where does that fit in? A great conversation with Andrew, and talking a little bit about what he enjoys in his life and who has inspired him throughout his year or throughout his career. We're going to have a chance to talk with him right now here on the Brewer Magazine podcast. This Brewer Mag podcast is sponsored by Keg Logistics. Now's the perfect time to review your keg management strategy. Whether you're seeking a truly flexible keg rental program or intrigued by the seamless distribution freedom of paper fill, Keg Logistics is ready to craft a personalized solution for you, ensuring you receive the kegs you need precisely when you need them. For details, visit keglogistics.com/brewermag. Keg Logistics, modern solutions for keg efficiency. And we welcome in Andrew Blake, the CEO of Blake's Beverage Company, here on the Brewer Magazine podcast, as we're focusing on the cider business side of things for this month. Andrew, how's it going?
It's going great, John. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. And I bet you probably talk to a lot of people in the industry, and they ask how Armada is. How's Armada doing? Because being from the UP, I know my city's in Michigan, so love to be able to get the pronunciation right.
Well, it's great. It's as small and hometown as ever. You know, I always make the joke we have more tractor stores than we do restaurants and bars, and we like it that way. But things are going great on the farm. We've had a great spring. It's planting season, just kind of wrapping up. So. We grow about 1,500 acres of fruit in total. Most of those are apple and tree based, but we do, strawberries, raspberries. We're busy and things are going well. And, the cider business is going well. So we're super grateful and lucky for that as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being that you guys did start, you've been an orchard for way longer than you've been a hard cider. I mean, this has been a family business for a long time, and we're pretty close in geography, so I'm enjoying. I can't wait to finish this podcast up and go enjoy the day, because it is such a beautiful. We finally have spring has shown up. I mean, has that kind of screwed with you guys over the spring so far?
Yeah, from a farming perspective, I would say it's been pretty perfect weather, actually. Getting stuff in the ground and just getting prepared for the season, and it's been pretty kind to us. No major freezes or anything like that that'll help like input crops. But I think on the alcohol business, there's just been a general malaise or softness, multiple dimensions to that. We can get into, consumer preference and, kind of calendar year over year and weather, frankly. And all of those things have kind of been, headwinds at the industry at large. But, we've been lucky to, post double-digit growth, within Blake's Beverage Company. We got a really great, customer base that we think is extremely loyal. And we think we kind of understand kind of where the consumer's at today, which is we're finding, Blake's Beverage Company is kind of endeavoring to be a beyond beer leader in the beyond beer space, really focused on fruited fermentation. It's what we know. It comes from our heritage. We have 3 production facilities throughout the United States, in Oregon, upstate New York, and Michigan, in Armada. And so we feel like we're really trying to focus in on where the consumer is at, and that just happens to be with where we've been for over 80 years as fruit farmers. I feel like no one knows how to ferment fruit better than our team here, and we're excited to bring products that consumers are looking for. So I wish for the general industry that we, can kind of get past some of these headwinds and kind of turn it into some tailwinds. I have some reason to believe that that's, happening and here soon. And there's some things that I think indicate that, but yeah, super appreciative for all you do for the industry and promoting, kind of what we do.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having coming on with us and talking some of this stuff because
Yeah.
we get a lot of information from you guys. You guys are pretty much an open book, being able to talk about the business side of things. How has investments going forward or strategies that have changed again because of some of the changes that have gone on? What are you seeing right now that you guys have seemed to have a strong start over first quarter of 2025? What led to that?
Yeah, I think there's no magic apple or banana to kind of how some of this happens. We've been fortunate where we've historically invested very aggressively in sales and marketing. I think that's paid off in this moment as we've had a really good chain set in the Springs with a lot of our brands, the Austin Eastciders brand in the South and Southwest and Southeast. Blake's is kind of our national position, and then AVID in the Pacific Northwest. So, there's been different wins, we could talk about within those portfolios, but I think Blake's is today the number 2 cider company in the country with fastest growing trends. So I think we're at a point now where we've probably earned the right finally to be taken serious by retailers and people are looking at the data specifically with some of our hero brands, and they speak for themselves. So we've been able to leverage that and ride that momentum. And we have a lot of work to do still, but we've kind of caught a wave of kind of trend within some of our brands. I think that speaks to the product and the great work our team does. Really leading with quality, but also, the consumer that we've worked on building in some cases for 80 years and others over the last decade in the cider space. So,
sure.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, the last 3 years has been the move from being Blake's Hard Cider as your own company to Blake's Beverage company. It's AVID was first, Austin Eastciders came in later on that year. How have the 3 become one company yet continue? And I know when we talked originally, when you guys acquired AVID, that like they're the Pacific Northwest, we're Blake's. Like, is it still that mentality? Do you guys still see that and being able to place either innovation or marketing strategies in different places?
Yeah. So, to be transparent, it's been an evolving conversation. I think our goal is to make sure all 3 brands continue with their own unique and individual soul and, really what they're about. And by no means do we want to alter that. So that's been something that's been super, sacred as we've kind of went through this process. We do see like a leverageability across the nation to leverage Salesforce and marketing. So, where it makes sense, we are trying to like really think about a one Blake's team, working through what we call our Golden Apple network, which is our preferred network of distributors in each state. And frankly, as we look through innovation, season over season, really try to understand what makes Blake's, what makes Austin, and AVID, and make sure that they're as complementary to each other as possible. So, that's been an evolving thing. You get smarter every year and every quarter. And we're just trying to, be as, thoughtful and react appropriately when we learn new information. So, I'm really happy with where the organization is today. I think we have a very good view of, being the stewards of cider, being the largest independent cidery, the fastest growing, and hopefully, continuing to make gains on the number 1, which is Boston Beer. And thank you to them for all their investment into cider. But, we want to compete with them and continue to challenge them for the top spot. But I think our team's also getting smarter in how we think about innovation between the 3 brands. And we'll get into that and, some of our departures from cider and some of our innovation and some of the opportunities we see kind of in the beyond beer space kind of nationally.
Sure. Let's start with the cider though. And, giving cider and I think that it was in a press release that you guys ran back in November, giving it its rightful place as America's drink.
Yeah.
What does that look like from a long-term standpoint? What kind of barriers are still there? Because cider has been a part of America pretty much since the beginning. But craft cider kind of has just had this slow surge going forward in the last 20 years or so. Obviously there was some, legacy brands that have been around, but it's really exploded, and it's kind of has that the craft mentality has really come back, whether it's artisanal or it's through, all the other standards, not just orchard cideries, but people opening up, in towns, finding more juice, working with juice manufacturers.
Yep.
How does this work forward? How does it become that rightful place that you guys believe that cider is?
Yeah, so I think there's some things. I think the Gen Z and millennial consumer definitely are gravitating to the types of drinks that are cider and cider adjacent. They want fruit forward, bold, kind of know where the ingredients come from. I think they're not drinking as frequently, and when they are, they're kind of trading up for things that have a story and come from a real place. So I think that works really well in our favor, and I think we'll continue to kind of think about how we increase, I guess, sampling and trial on premise and off premise. But I look at the big opportunity in cider is I think today it's below 2% of the beer market, total share. I think you look at a lot of countries where cider's prolific and it's 7 to 9%. So I think there's still amazing growth within cider, and I think our job is leaders in the industry with others who have really done a great job. We're a small knit community in the cider deal, so I could go region by region and talk about all the great cideries that are bringing products to people. But I think our job is to really continue to fight for our share within total alcohol, and I think we have a lot of upside to where we're at today. And I think historically over the last 10 years, while cider's grown, I think there's been like these movements, whether it be seltzer or not your father's root beer or whatever it is, that kind of come in and kind of take share of mind at retail. And I think cider's continuously been this kind of steady, kind of progression, year over year, especially from a regional standpoint. And I think, we need one of these cycles, which I think is happening now, where there's kind of an opening for cider to kind of break out a little bit and get a little bit more mind share and probably what it deserves, frankly, from what it's been able to produce consistently year over year. So,
yeah, because and I think it's always thought of as beer, liquor, wine, beer, wine, liquor. And there's that opportunity to become that mindset, the fourth category. How are you guys preaching that, whether it's within your company, talking to it as an industry with, through the ACA or other, Cider Institute? How do we get that become a fourth category, become the four different options instead? And where do people see cider, do you think, right now? And how do you guys kind of either combat that or lean into it?
Yeah. Really great question. I think you see a convergence right now from the traditional kind of big three wine spirits. You're seeing wholesalers jump in cross category. You're seeing suppliers, endeavor into things, kind of cross category. And I think what you see is this, redefinition of how I think retailers and consumers are engaging with the space. What we talk a lot about with our distributor partners and with our retail partners are like the consumer is really looking at flavor as a category. And if you look at some of the trends across all three, you'll notice that like fruited is one of the biggest obvious trends that are positive across all three. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. We could get into that, but we look at beverage companies. We want to help retailers really own and command and expand their flavor category. I mean, plain and simple, that's where we think where we thrive. I think you see that in kind of where you see seltzer, cider, RTD. I think those would be like the big three that I think are really making that up and are kind of being positioned in their own unique kind of area on shelf. And so we think that we can be a real natural, leader in that kind of larger, kind of category that's being redefined as we speak, frankly, by consumers and retailers.
And how has the innovation in that worked for you guys? Be it, like Austin East has the Spike Agua Fresca, AVID does Seven Peaks Hard Seltzer. How have you guys created those as a company, talked about them? and finding the shelf space for them?
Yeah. So, they're going well. It's always learning, and, we have to get smarter on how we, walk and chew gum and have a conversation about, cider and then, kind of flavor at large. So, we're learning those muscles. But, I would say that generally, one of the reasons we've had success, over the last, couple years where there's been headwinds in the industry at large is I think, because of our background, kind of where we started and kind of how we've always thought about ourselves as being, fermenters of fruit. I think we have a real social license to have this discussion with retailers and distributors. And I see a great excitement for what we offer, because I think people are looking for solutions to some of the challenges that the industry sees. And I think, we offer one of them. And, we haven't changed much about how we approach things, since we started. And I think it's just becoming a little bit more in vogue, frankly, which is, we're lucky to be, on that side of it. And through a lot of hard lessons and learning, right? We haven't made every right decision, but we've reacted quickly, and we've been, and we've been kind of humble enough to kind of keep learning and re-involving ourselves.
Sure. And a lot of it is flavor. Like you said, what does it mean, flavor category, to you guys? How does that kind of become even its own thing outside of beer, wine, liquor, cider? Flavor, like you're selling a flavor, you're not selling, it doesn't matter maybe what the base is, but your base is cider, so you want people to come to flavored cider type of things.
Yeah.
How has that strategy been discussed, and how do you see it going forward?
Yeah, I think it's kind of, you realize, I guess, as you go across the country, that different regions or geographies and buyers and retailers are at different places with this evolution. Some are kind of fully there, and they're like, well, this is obvious that like consumers really want big, bold flavor stuff when they drink, and there's some of the imperial trends that support that, and some of the full flavor dynamics that support that. And so it's not the only approach that's working, but we've really leaned into it, that this is, we have the data to support that this is where a certain subset of consumers really are at, and they're growing and they're pulling off shelf. So, we went region by region, but at the end of the day, you got to meet distributors and retailers where they're at. Some want to have a more traditional conversation about the category, and we're happy to have that. Because our cider and our brands kind of speak for themselves, from a data perspective. But I really do think this larger shift, because if you look at retail space just in general, there's a huge change that needs to be happening as far as what is being allocated to what segments, in the cold box and in different retail stores. So no one disagrees with the fact that that needs to be reset. I think the conversation is like, what is the right allocation, and what makes sense from where consumers are at today, where they'll be tomorrow, and where they'll be next year. I think that's like the real discussion that's being had. And I think everyone's at a different place in that understanding too, all searching for the right answer, of course. So, we just kind of try to lead with data. We try to be very specific with every region we're in. We try to bring like a real like perspective and understanding, of the retailer and of the, of the region. And then try to have the most honest discussion around it. And, that's proved successful. So again, no real, magic bullet here on kind of what makes sense. It's just kind of putting in the work, and having the discussions, and trying to kind of mutually find success. That's what everyone's trying to do,
Yeah. Do you feel that as you guys have grown as a company, that you are seeing a more educated consumer? Or do you think that there is mixed messaging, and it is still your job to educate consumers on, what cider is, what cider can be? Because do you feel that cider drinkers sometimes, especially younger ones that are coming into it, don't understand it as much, and you have to kind of cater to them? Or are you finding those, aficionados of cider that are finding you guys? This Brewer Mag podcast is sponsored by Keg Logistics. Now's the perfect time to review your keg management strategy. Whether you're seeking a truly flexible keg rental program or intrigued by the seamless distribution freedom of paper fill, Keg Logistics is ready to craft a personalized solution for you, ensuring you receive the kegs you need precisely when you need them. For details, visit keglogistics.com/brewermag. Keg Logistics, modern solutions for keg efficiency.
Yeah, great question. Apple beer. I come from, a very Busch Light drinking, kind of part of the country, and it still gets referred to as apple beer, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And so, I say that to say that, like, we have a huge job of educating, today and forever forward. I think it's always going to be part of our job, and part of our opportunity, frankly. I think there are really specific regions where you see kind of cider aficionados and people who really understand the art and the science and the romance of cider and why it is such a unique and special drink. But I would say the consumer at large, there's just a general education that needs to be happening, every day, every week. And I think that's our opportunity and our job and responsibility, frankly. So if we're going to be, the stewards of cider, as we like to think we are, then we have to make sure we're, showing up in that way and making sure we're educating and creating, opportunities for people to learn about what we do.
Do you feel that there's a lot more, I love the word promiscuous drinkers. It just sounds naughty, but cross-category drinkers than there was probably when you guys started?
Yeah. 100%. I mean, I remember the stickiness of the beer drinker, 10 years ago. And I've just seen a real transition into, what I would say, flexibility of the consumer to try new things. I think they're very exploratory. I think that's great from a sampling standpoint. If you make a really good product, I think you're in a moment in time where, like, people you're gonna have the opportunity to sample it and get it in front of people. So I do look at this moment and kind of the promiscuousness of maybe drinkers today as an opportunity, especially if you make a really, really good product, which we do here at Blake's and many others do. So I think if in that moment, in making sure that there is this kind of sampling opportunity, there is opportunity to gain new consumers, and I think that that's probably more true now more than ever. I think it's just a matter of making sure you're making products where they're at, and that's what we spend a lot of time, from a research standpoint, like data standpoint, and just having conversations on trying to understand where that consumer is at and where they're going.
You kind of talked about from, when you guys started and talking about beer drinkers, things like that. It's been over a dozen years since you guys have launched the hard cider brand, and you guys have built yourself to be that national player. What have you learned from either yourself as a company, as a CEO? What have you learned from the industry that, you've had to help see cider move forward? Like, what are the business strategies? What are some of the inflection points that have been able to fuel your growth?
Yeah, really good time. A really good question. I mean, I've learned a lot. I say this, like, very humbly. Like, we've kind of been very lucky because we've made every mistake possible as a company at our size, and I think that's okay as long as you don't make the same mistake twice and you learn from it. Good thing is we're growing, so we're constantly learning from our old mistakes and making new. Kind of in the spirit of always falling forward, kind of in our journey. So I think we've kind of endeavored our growth with that mindset. And probably, like, the big advice or kind of thought I would have around that is, like, I think you hit these ceilings in your growth if you're trying to grow and you're trying to continue to expand, where, like, you have to be willing to kind of, rethink about, kind of your mission, kind of where you're at. You have to be willing to reset, because kind of you get to that point of what got you here, won't get you there, that famous book and kind of mantra. And I think you have to be really willing to, like, retool the way you show up as a leader, the way you think about the business. The business obviously gets way more complex. It's far more complex than I ever used to think about it. From a regional standpoint to a product innovation standpoint, thinking cross category, thinking, how we maintain our culture and, ethos. All those things kind of get, more dynamic as you continue to ascend in the industry and grow. So we've just been very frank when we hit a wall, which everyone does. There's no shame in that you just have to like really be honest with yourself and be transparent about what's working and what's not, and go back to the drawing board. And there's no real silver, there's no real answer to that other than being introspective and honest with yourself and your team and coming out with a path forward that everyone agrees on. So
sure. How about for you? How has your job changed over the years? I mean, like you've grown up in this, and then kind of, found a niche that you wanted to build within, and have seen it. And now, you're running 3 different companies under one umbrella. I mean, how much of this is something that was internal, you knew you wanted to do it, and how much of it is learning along the way?
Yeah. I've kind of, I hate to say it this way because it sounds like, I kind of was just taking a flyer on an idea, but like, I think in the very honest sense, very few people really know where they're going to end up. You get on a path, you maybe have a general direction, how you get there and what that ultimately looks like. I think, very few people are smart enough or able to architect that. I definitely am not. So it evolved for me. It started as something I wanted to come back and add to the family, business and dynamics. Really was trying to solve, frankly, a struggle my family had, which was we only had seasonal revenue. It was not a year-round business. It was really hard in a lot of ways. So I wanted to help that. That was kind of my mission. The timing was good, and frankly, got a little lucky with when Boston Beer came onto the scene and got asked for the brand to expand. And I got on the road. One of my favorite movies was Tommy Boy growing up, and I tried to channel as much of that in my road travels throughout the country. Learned a lot from that, and then you do that for about 7 years, and next thing you know, you're a pretty big company, and you got to start figuring out how you grow up and how you think about your time spent, and what the business is asking for you and from you. And how you need to show up differently from how you used to when you were on the road Tommy Boying. So it's just been an evolution for me. I'm really grateful for where we've kind of landed, and excited for where our future is. I think our best years and decades are ahead. And I think we're just getting started in some sense. And it hasn't been without its share of like knockdowns and mistakes and challenges, but we continue to bring in really, really talented people that help us in this journey, and super grateful to the team we have and our distributor and retail partners who've supported us and our brands. We're super lucky in that way.
I really hope, speaking of Tommy Boy, that you got to use the butcher analogy in your sales pitch at some point.
As often as I can. Yeah.
And not his dad's version, the actual Tommy Boy version. You talked a little bit about being a leader. And I think the biggest part is when you're starting small, you're on so many different hats, being on the road. How have you had to learn to trust others to run the company with you instead of you? And I know I'm in the same, capacity where, running a magazine, like having the trust of someone else to make sure that it gets done and it's on brand and it's a part of the culture, has that been a big hard point for you to be able to work through as well?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. I think there's like these moments of like needing to let go and leading to like trust, but verify, there's all that type of, evolution you have. I think like the thing I've come to like the biggest realization on is, you need to be always self-assessing and really honest with yourself. What is your superpower? Everyone has one. Some people are really good at, certain things. And I think as a leader, it's incumbent on you to make sure you really know what you're good at. And frankly, more important to know what you struggle with and what you're not good at, and making sure that you either put a plan to improve on the things that you're not great at, or bring in people that can support you to shore up your weaknesses, so to speak, so you can go and be great at what you're great at. So I think that's just like this honest internal dialogue. As I started to think about that more broadly than like, I'm a better sales guy than a finance guy, or, I enjoy the product development side more than production, and I struggle with, that, or, however all that works out. I would say that, our HR and, kind of internal discussion around our own like executive strengths and weaknesses has like been something that's really been helpful. A lot of great tools out there to help you think through that and understand yourself better. I encourage any like entrepreneur or leader, to like go through that. It's super healthy. Nothing to be afraid of, and I think gives you a clear roadmap on how you think about, developing yourself in the areas you need to develop and showing up differently, or bringing on talent to support and shore up your weaknesses. So that's been really a great process. That's really evolved over the last 3 years as we've gotten more complex. And frankly, the more complex your business gets, probably the more you should think about that. Frankly.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, looking at the cider industry as a whole, it has grown. It's, and coming from a beer magazine first, and then adding the cider after, I see the trends a little bit a different way, in covering the industry and going to things like CiderCon. I see that maybe it's not, and not saying this in a derogatory way, but 10 to 15 years behind what craft beer was. So when I'm at CiderCon in Chicago this year, it reminds me of the first time I went to the Craft Brewers Conference in Portland, and 10 years prior, and just the camaraderie, the we can do this, the gumption. It's great to see like that. Do you see the same thing? And having that collaborative community, co-opetition, a lot of people like to use that word. Do you see that in the cider industry as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been really lucky, and there's just been a really good group of, I think, regional brands that have really worked well together. I think that's been a really great thing to see. I think of like Colin Schilling, at Schilling Cider. I think he's a great CEO and runs a great company, and always been really transparent and helpful when we needed help. Our friends at Down East, there's I can name a bunch of them. Vandermill, Uncle John's, like all of the names who have kind of really been a staple in helping develop the cider industry and building the cider category. That's been really, really great. I think the Cider Association is really starting to get thoughtful about ways it can impact kind of exposure more nationally. So I think we're making really good progress there. And like I said, I think at the end of the day, cider is kind of primed for its kind of growth moment and kind of evolution. I think while we've had one over the last, call it 20 years, I think there's another, iteration of that, coming soon, and like now, I think. And I'm super excited for that, because the more we can all lean in that together, kind of grow a bigger pie, I think that's what everyone wants. And that's when industry is really fun. And it's not, and all industries aren't always that way. And they're maybe only like that for a period of time, right? Because at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers and the facts are the facts. But I think for where cider's been at and where it's going, I think we're in a really good spot, and I'm super optimistic.
Well, awesome. Yeah, I love talking business with you, but I want to get to know you a little bit. I want people to get to know you a little bit.
Awesome.
Some fun questions. We'll start with one. You're a local kid. Who was your favorite teacher? High school, elementary? Like, who's the first teacher that comes to mind for you in your growing up years?
Yeah, so Mr. McDevitt was my gym teacher. He was also my basketball coach, and he also spoke at my wedding. And he had a big impact on me on just kind of how I approach life. He's been a mentor to me. I always enjoyed how he handled, how he viewed life. I'd always grown up in like a family business, and the way he kind of approached kind of the other parts of life that I thought were really important to round you out. The family time. Kind of curating, your hobbies, your curiosities, in the spirit of being like a really well-rounded person. Like he meant the world for me in that. And I think taught me some really great lessons that I've kind of carried over as I've tried to, create a rounded individual in myself beyond just my work life. And he kicked my ass in basketball and made me a really, really good athlete when I, at times probably was a pain in his ass. So he's one that comes to mind. Just to shout out at another, Eric Foster. I went to Armada Public Schools, which is one of the best public schools in the state. I'm super lucky for that. He was my English teacher and kind of taught me like critical thinking, and I always had a passion for reading. So he really kind of, continued to kind of pull that out of me, and I learned a lot from him that still kind of resonates to this day. So high school was impactful, and I've always been a big fan of kind of where I grew up, and super, grateful for that. And it has a big impact for your entire life. So
very awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Going a completely different direction.
Yeah.
If you could guest star on any TV show, what would it be, and what would you be the role of? What would you be on for?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. That's tough. I've been really into the new show Stick, which is like the golf show with Owen Wilson.
Okay.
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind being the kid's caddy. I think that'd be fun. I have a horrible golf game, but I enjoy watching it, and I enjoy studying it. So that would be one. But there's probably a million ways I could go with that question. That's a good one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, we'll wrap it up with this one. We've been talking about flavor as it is.
Yeah.
What's the weirdest food combination you secretly love?
Oh, my wife's gonna. Yeah. So I really like to make spaghetti sandwiches. It's like an odd thing. So I take my wife's leftover spaghetti, and then like the next day I make toast. I put like hot sauce and like jalapeno peppers on it and pickles, and I make a spaghetti sandwich. And my wife thinks it's absolutely the most disgusting and odd thing ever, but I love them.
Gotta love that's back end carb loading for you right there.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't get more carby than that, actually. So
well, it's funny because I've asked this to a few people, and I've shared this answer before, but everyone always finds it really funny. I do more garlic bread now, and it's funny that you brought up spaghetti. But growing up, we never did garlic bread. I don't know if it's because my mom didn't like garlic or what, but she made me peanut butter sandwiches with spaghetti.
Oh wow, yeah.
That's
hilarious.
I know. And now it's like I always encourage people, just try it once. The spaghetti sauce with the peanut butter. I don't know. It's weird. And that's what made me think of that.
Yeah, I'm pretty exploratory with my palate. Like I'll try anything once, and luckily or unluckily, I don't know. The only food I've found that I can't eat again is olives. Other than that, it's like open out, anything goes. So
the official burger of Michigan, and you can't have yourself an olive burger.
I know. It's wild.
Well, Andrew, appreciate you talking business, talking flavors, and talking food. So we appreciate having you here on the Brewer Magazine podcast for Cider Business.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for all you do for the industry and for cider. So we'll talk soon.
This Brewer Mag podcast is sponsored by Keg Logistics. Now's the perfect time to review your keg management strategy. Whether you're seeking a truly flexible keg rental program or intrigued by the seamless distribution freedom of paper fill, Keg Logistics is ready to craft a personalized solution for you, ensuring you receive the kegs you need precisely when you need them. For details, visit keglogistics.com/brewermag. Keg Logistics, modern solutions for keg efficiency.